Repeat that, she said coldly, eyes narrowing over the long shadow of the table. The silence was broken by the soft click of a pen, then his voice measured, precise, saying, "Your quarterlies reflect a revenue spike that was never filed. I can pull the old patents if you prefer it public." Her hand hovered above her phone, knuckles white. An assistant in the second row stopped typing. The legal counsel glanced up, shifting in his seat. The CEO's reply was clipped. "You're bluffing." He slid a thin sheaf of yellowed paper onto the glass, letting it sit there untouched. "I never asked for the seat. You took it from me." The air held tight, electric, a heartbeat too long. No one moved. She rose a few inches out of her chair, lips parted. For a moment, the length of 3 silent breaths, the outcome balanced between them. In every room, there is a moment when power tips. Stay with this story until the very end. It started 2 weeks earlier, on a wind-scoured morning outside the downtown hotel. Trevor Harris pressed his palm to the steel hood of the rental sedan, feeling the faint pulse of heat beneath worn paint. With every throaty cough from the engine bay, the pressure behind his left ear ticked upward, that low, insistent vibration he'd learned to live with since the shop accident last winter. His 5-year-old daughter, Eve, clutched her battered leather journal between tiny fists, tracing imprinted letters she couldn't yet read. He had finished his shift in the downtown garage an hour earlier. Soot-black fingernails, aching wrists, the residual hum in his ears left by years of engine noise. A line of cars snaked along the curb, suitcases clustered at tired feet, all eyes flickering to the hotel doors that never quite opened fast enough. He set his duffel on the concrete with care, shoulder joints screaming in protest, and stooped to pick up Eve, balancing work tools in the crook of his arm. The reservation email, flagged twice in his cracked screen phone, blinked urgently. Prepaid, non-refundable, needed for the regional mechanics conference, 12 rooms left when he booked, 500 mechanics in town for the week. No plan B. He stepped through polished glass into the lobby. Granite floors, reflected silhouettes, hotel clerks moving with efficiency, the steady shuffle of guests with more confidence and time than he'd had in years. A woman in an ice-silver blazer broke off her conversation near the reception desk and intercepted his approach. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You the mechanic." He nodded. "Just need to check in. Harris, 1-room reservation, been paid." She looked at the reservation screen, didn't touch it. Instead, she flicked a glance at Eve, then back at him. "Sir, your booking was canceled this morning." "That's not possible," he said, voice as steady as it could be. "I got the confirmation last night. Here," he tapped the screen. "It's paid, check again." Her lips curled. "We have select standards here. Your work event overbooked us." He laid the cracked phone deliberately on the counter over the dividing line. "My 5-year-old needs a place to sleep. I'm here for the competition." She didn't blink. "Try the 2-star on 6th. No room here." The manager motioned to security, who hovered behind handrails with the bored posture of someone expecting trouble only from those who need least to make it. Eve tugged his sleeve, eyes wide. "Daddy, are we in trouble for being late?" Trevor shook his head, voice soft. "Not your fault, kiddo." A figure hovered at the edge of the open mezzanine, tall, controlled, an executive's smile perfectly sharpened for display. The CEO. She was flanked by 2 assistants and a phone she did not look up from. Her tone cut through the lobby. "Next, please. Some people prioritize early reservations and professionalism." The words hung like set traps. Trevor collected his bag, folding the reservation printout into a crisp square before tucking it away. He didn't argue. He walked, chin level, hand tight around Eve's shoulder, into the certainty of another cold night. The sliding doors glided open behind them. He never heard the manager's parting words. Across the lobby, laughter rippled in their wake. The game had started. Their apartment building was 6 blocks from the strip of midtown garages, a cinderblock 2-story walk-up, insulation thinning, neighbors who traded hellos only on rent day. Trevor led Eve along the dim corridor, keys scraping against the stuck lock, and let her scamper inside first, the familiar squeak of her tennis shoes echoing in the narrow space. Eve hopped onto the battered sofa, journal pressed between her knees. Trevor watched as she moved the stub of a pencil, her mother S chewed at one end over the first page, drawing careful loops around letters with meanings just beyond her reach. She looked up. "You going to fix it this time?" He smiled, setting the lunch bag on the counter. "Do you mean the radiator or the breakfast?" She grinned. "Both." He opened her journal gently, laying out a fresh note on the blank inside cover. Today, brave again. Proud of you. He slid a cookie beside her, ruffling her hair. Eve regarded him, gaze untethered from the page. Daddy, do you ever get tired of always being so quiet? He paused, bare fingers at the rim of a glass, and let her question roll through the small kitchen. This had always been her way, direct, sparing no room for armor. He set the glass down, exhaled a tight breath. Sometimes, he said, neutral, it's my turn to listen for a while. He lingered in the doorway just long enough for her to tuck her journal beneath the faded pillow on the sofa, her secret place, the one he never asked about. The apartment was measured in small rituals now. Dishes left for soaking, a lopsided casserole dish on the counter, the scent of his wife's perfume still lingering from the silk scarf folded in the drawer next to unpaid utility bills. A single framed photograph turned toward the shadows caught the brushed light, his wife in uniform, laughing with a bear hug around a tiny, grinning Eve. He tucked the military challenge coin further back in his toolbox beneath a bundle of invoices. The coin's face caught the refracted kitchen bulb and winked once before disappearing into darkness. He marked the expiration on his insurance paperwork, tracing the line where last year's premium had doubled. 11 days until rent. 4 until the preliminary trials at the conference. He added a fresh note on Eve's sandwich wrap, "Take care of your heart." She peered at the letters. What does this say? He bent, face close to hers. It means I love you and to be careful crossing today. She fingered the page. Will you fix anything else today? He let her have the last question unspoken. He would try. Miles west, Miranda Foster adjusted her silver cufflinks, signaling for her driver with one clipped gesture as she crossed the marble threshold of her penthouse elevator. The city below soaked up the morning light, a mosaic of properties Miranda's family had collected, traded, and outmaneuvered for 2 generations. Today, the phone on her desk glowed with the afterimage of a boardroom call, quarterly reports, urgent, 2 missed connections. She swept into her corner office, toes silent on imported wool carpeting, eye falling immediately on the pale blue bottle at the back of her desk. Each morning, a ritual now, a measured dose of medication to steady hands and joints before the parade of meetings. She downed the pills with water and for a moment let her eyes settle on the framed certificate. Autoimmune diagnosis, a name almost elegant in script, tucked well behind her late father's photo. Prep my 9 a.m., she said to the assistant, voice even. Where's the contract? Waiting for signature. Scrap the hotel's low-level event block, clear the schedule for investors. She signed her name in 2 clean lines. A notification beeped, a calendar entry flagged critical, market deadline next to, and she swiped it aside. Her assistant hovered uncertainly. Miranda's eyes narrowed. Speak. There's a complaint from room assignments, the assistant stammered. A mechanic, his daughter, prepaid. Miranda flattened the file with 2 fingers. Enforce the standards, no special treatments. But he has the receipts, concierge tried. No charity, move him. She snapped the folder shut, gesturing for coffee. We do not sponsor sentimentality. The assistant backed away. Later alone, Miranda rolled a gold pen between her knuckles as her eyes traced the outline of her father's vest on the old charity photo. She scrolled a saved thread on her phone, hospital check-ins, gaps of silence wider than comfort, and closed it. Her voice, when she made the decision, barely above a whisper, no loose ends this week. She dialed the property manager. Jennifer, pull the room, prioritize the investor's block, I want nothing missed. Understood, came the reply. A horn sounded from the street below, a mechanic's coat visible, child at his side. For a heartbeat, Miranda hesitated, but she let the phone fall into its cradle, gaze distant. The order was carried out, 11 days to deadline. Days swept past in the hum of engines and the sharp sting of solvents embedded in Trevor's hands. In the makeshift competition tent, a stir rippled as the lead car, a retrofitted safety sedan, part of the NHTSA demo, sputtered silent. A cluster of engineers hunched over the diagnostics, the clock marking 10 minutes to trial time, nerves showing in each exchanged whisper. The event coordinator's face pinched with anxiety. No time, will have to forfeit. Trevor moved forward, coveralls half-zipped, wiping his hands on an oil-streaked rag. He watched, still and silent, the lines of code blurring across the monitor before stepping in. "It's not the alternator, it's the impact sensor not replaced after last week's side test," he said, voice pitched just loud enough for the trio around him. The junior tech stared. "Are you sure the voltage?" "Sensor reads live, but the crash log says otherwise." His fingers pointed, careful, controlled. The coordinator hesitated. "We need to confirm, try it." Trevor ducked under the hood, lines of old scar tissue tightening beneath his shirt collar, working by touch more than sight. He swapped the sensor, recalibrated the relay, stood back and nodded. "Turn it over." The engine answered on the third try, clean, urgent, responding as though the road home depended on it. A moment's stunned silence, then applause broke out. Miranda entered, heels sharp against the pavers. She barely glanced at the car. "Anyone could have managed that," she said coolly. "It's basic if you know the model." A ripple of unease ran through the crowd. The lead witness, Darren, a contract supervisor, watched the exchange, eyes narrowed, uncertainty behind a polite smile. Later, he cornered Trevor by the coffee urn. "How'd you see that so fast? That log system is proprietary only." "Experience," Trevor replied, folding a napkin into neat squares. "Just another day at the shop." Darren's gaze lingered on Trevor's hands, then his left ear. "Haven't seen you around the regional meets." Trevor shrugged. "Don't have time for the scene." Darren nodded, still curious as the crowd dispersed. He had seen this before, 20 years ago. Back in the service corridor, Darren lingered near the loading dock, hands running idly over an archived list of competition registrants. The name Harris T. Unremarkable, yet the diagnostics earlier were too precise to be mere chance. Something about the physical stance, the quick scan of the sensor mounts, the way Trevor had signed off on the repair form, a little too practiced. Darren found himself drawn to the conference database and entered a search. Trevor Harris, early 30s, out of state, single parent. One hit on an old NHTSA panel in DC 5 years back. He dug deeper, a patent registered jointly to a Trevor M. Harris regarding high-impact crash reconstruction parameters. Declined NHTSA employment, reason listed as immediate family crisis, military spousal loss. Darren's hands paused over the mouse. Elsewhere in the apartment, Eve colored loops inside her journal, lines bleeding into each other. Trevor washed up after a hasty dinner, bracing himself against the counter. She approached, journal in hand. "Daddy, do all the other kids have a friend to walk home with?" He stopped, dish in mid-rinse, water pooling around his fingers. "Some do." She bit her lip, "But she needs a friend." He closed his eyes for a heartbeat. That landed the old hurt, the questions he feared every night. Darren's research continued. He turned up an original declined contract letter signed in meticulous blue ink. Next to it, a digital copy of the crash sensor patent, Harris's name, visible beside a co-author he vaguely remembered from an old industry conference. Meanwhile, an email landed in Miranda's inbox. "Award submission freeze, final selection next Tuesday, contract pending." The countdown grew visible. The next morning brought a new escalation. Miranda's fixer, Elise, appeared at the event tent with a clipboard and a message for Darren. "We're culling our undercard contractors," she announced flatly. Darren stepped aside, keeping his tone neutral. "And who decided that?" She smiled, unsmiling. "The CEO wants this event spotless." He held his ground. "I have 2 weeks left on contract." "Not anymore, priority revamp." She turned, shoes scraping the gravel. "Your loss," he said, forcing cheer he didn't feel. Later, Darren found Trevor in the garage. "They're squeezing you out." "I'm just here for the circuit," Trevor replied, not looking for a fight. Darren extended a file, voice low. "Your name, S on a patent. You invented the sensor tech, didn't you?" Trevor didn't take the file. "I fixed what was broken, that's all." Darren nodded, closing the file. "That's never all." Eve peeked around the corner, clutching her journal. She didn't say anything, just stood, watching 2 grown men, notebooks and worry scattered at their feet. Down the corridor, a phone pinged, the subject line brutal. Deadlines moved up. Selection Tuesday, 9 a.m. sharp. He laced up his boots, tension in every seam. The clock had begun ticking in public. On a gusted city crosswalk, Miranda's campaign of escalation unfurled. The block list from the hotel went citywide, Trevor's garage account frozen. An email to Eve's school, mistakenly flagged for parental noncompliance, threatened her after-school program slot. The next boardroom session, Miranda entered flanked by her fixers. "Gentlemen," she said, voice iron, "I trust our transition teams have made themselves clear." Trevor stood by the siding, arms folded, napkin clenched between finger and palm. She made no eye contact. "Our standards remain, no outliers, no distractions." Darren, sitting in the back, caught Miranda's gaze. "This strictness new, seems like last year we took all comers." Miranda didn't respond. Later, as doors opened to the lobby, Trevor's phone vibrated. He stepped away, voice low. "This is Harris. Yes, you can come now." He slid the phone back in his pocket, face unreadable. Eve, at kindergarten, traced alone in her workbook. Another child glanced at her, uncertain, a friendship that now waited on some invisible fence. Trevor went home that night, hands weaving through the careful ritual of dinner with Eve. He leaned in, brushing her hair behind her ear. She looked up and asked, "Daddy, are you in trouble again?" He smiled small. "Not your fault, never your fault." He should not have made this her problem. Tuesday, the boardroom stretched with shadows, occupancy at capacity, not a chair spare. A ring of directors, assistants poised behind laptops, financial journalists flanking the far side. Eve stood next to Trevor, feet not quite touching the ground, her leather journal zipped into her backpack. Miranda swept in, confidence radiating. "Thank you all for coming. Today's agenda, formalizing new contracts and addressing unfounded disruptions." Her eyes cut to Trevor, standing at the back in pressed shirt, oil still marking his wrists, a badge he wore quietly. "We've operated under a standard of excellence," Miranda intoned. "Certain parties, however, seek to insert themselves." Darren spoke from his seat. "Before we move on, I've brought something up from the archives." He nodded to a courier, who delivered a bundle of yellowed patent paperwork to the center of the table. The lead director extracted a sheet, scanning it. Trevor's name, co-author. NHTSA Crash Sensor 2018. The room shifted, weight buckling from Miranda's side to a new, uncertain middle. Miranda's hand found the edge of the table. "This is irrelevant, our project, our contracts." Darren's voice clipped. "Not if the intellectual property was never transferred. Per NHTSA records, Mr. Harris declined the employment offer due to military family circumstances. The patent, however, remains his, unlicensed application by your group this quarter." Miranda's jaw moved once, then stopped. Trevor watched calmly, then set a slim, folded document, a maintenance log, onto the table. "Your quarterlies reflect a revenue spike that was never filed. I can pull the old patents if you prefer it public." Across the room, assistants' fingers stilled over laptop keys. The legal counsel looked up, face taut. Miranda's reply, barely above a whisper, "You're bluffing." Trevor's fingers traced the document. "I never asked for the seat, you took it from me." The boardroom hung suspended. Miranda rose a fraction from her chair, knuckles pale. A single exhale echoed against glass. The assistant in the second row chewed anxiously at her lower lip. A journalist at the end of the table watched the CEO, his hand unmoving over the record button. No one else spoke. Miranda's voice finally cracked. "Why did you never come forward? Why now?" Trevor blinked slow. "Because she needs a friend." Not a sound followed. The collapse had already begun, lines of code in server logs, contracts rescinded by anxious clients, stock prices falling as fast as regulators could type. The end, clean and unceremonious, made itself visible in the shifting eyes across mahogany. Miranda sat down heavily, as if her body had only now registered the turn of the room. Trevor turned Eve's hand in his. He repeated only once, voice even, "I never asked for the seat, you took it from me." 6 months later, the city's skyline cut sharper lines against the horizon, cranes stilled in long rows. Half a dozen projects paused, never resumed. In Eve's elementary school cafeteria, the lunch table chatter peaked and dipped with midday energy. Darren, once a line supervisor, now managed safety standards for the district. He set his tray next to Trevor, who volunteered at the after-school program on the side. Trevor slid a lunch note into Eve's journal, proud of you for trying. She ran her tiny finger over the letters. She looked up, her question simple, Daddy, do you still want to be quiet today? He shook his head, matching her gaze. Not with you, not anymore. The door to the cafeteria opened. A new figure, a substitute teacher, marshaled noisy kindergartners into line. Miranda's name was a whisper on lips, her quiet resignation, buried 2 quarters ago in a 4-sentence press release. Her presence was a rumor, nothing more. Trevor watched Eve run out onto the playground, her journal flapping in the breeze, pages filling with lines she could nearly read now. In some cities, legacy is counted by the length of a building's shadow at dusk. In this family, it was the short, deliberate stride of a child across worn-out grass, her father's steady hand always 1 step behind. Stories about justice rarely end with someone listening. Sometimes they begin with someone choosing not to be silent, 3 words at a time. A light drizzle freckled the wide playground windows, drawing watery lines across faded paint and chain link. Trevor stood at the threshold, feeling the bite of early spring in the draft. He saw Eve, her backpack swinging wide as she ran, darting toward a huddle of kids in red jackets. She waved, her journal clasped overhead like a flag. The edges of the playground blurred as wind kicked up, but the group shifted, making space. She dropped to her knees in the mulch, flipping the cover and showing the looping script written just for her. Darren nudged Trevor's elbow. She's got more guts than half the people I worked for in 20 years. She gets that from her mother, Trevor answered. For a moment, the words nearly faded before they emerged, steady and true as an engine turning over on a frozen morning. In the hush that followed, he found himself exhaling for the first time in months, some valve inside cracking open. The after-school director called out names for the next activity, robotics club, sign-up sheets held high by a 6th grader eager to lead, safety goggles dangling from an ear. Eve shot up, her hand in the air. Trevor grinned and nodded. She darted to the line. She's ready, Darren said, nodding approval. So what about you, going back to the garage, or... He let the final words hang between them, freighted by all the possible futures the last half-year had unlocked. I took a part-time at City Fleet, Trevor said, leaning against the doorframe, and some consulting keeps things stable for her, more time home. He reached for the battered lunch pail at his feet and turned it over in his palms, the old challenge coin winking in his pocket. And I have a patent negotiation to finish. Union wants help with safety systems. Not bad for a man who didn't want a seat, Darren teased, low and careful enough not to draw curious ears. Trevor smiled, warm but tired. I only wanted the work. The rest... He looked through the window again at his daughter, half-lit by a stray sunbeam, a cluster of classmates leaning in as she opened her journal. In her careful hands, the words he'd labored to write became a story retold, colored in crayon and hope. The rest, he realized, would be up to her. From inside the school office, a voice cut across the hallway. Mr. Harris, the principal, a fresh folder in hand, do you have a minute? Trevor excused himself from Darren and followed the principal in. The office was lined with art projects, bright construction paper sunbursts and pipe cleaner robots dangling from the ceiling. The principal cleared her throat. I wanted to let you know, Eve's test results came back. Trevor tensed, searching the principal's eyes for signs of trouble. She's above grade level in reading now. Her teacher says she's persistent. She keeps trying even when she doesn't know the words. The principal's smile was gentle. We think she'd do well in the bridge program. It runs in the evenings, but it's free for families who have had transitions. Trevor felt the ache behind his eye, a shifting pressure of pride, relief, and something ancient that might finally be rest. Thank you, I'll talk to her tonight. As he stepped out, the after-school bell chimed. Eve barreled toward him, breathless, cheeks pink from running. Daddy, we built a catapult. I built one and it almost hit the wall, but then I fixed it, like you fix things. He squatted until her eyes matched his. You used your notebook, he asked, tipping his chin toward the journal. She nodded, jubilant, wrote down what went wrong, and then I did it different. Trevor pressed his hand to her shoulder and squeezed, fighting back the urge to say too much. He let her words fill the empty places. Darren called from the corner, waving a stack of safety vests. You two coming out to watch the trials on Saturday, unions letting guests into the pit lanes. Eve's eyes widened. Can I, Daddy, please? He glanced at Darren, reading the invitation for what it was, a welcome back, a line drawn from past to possible. We'll be there, he said. Outside, the rain had lifted, clouds splitting apart to show a patchwork of sky. Eve ran ahead, jumping muddy puddles with feet light as a bird's. Trevor caught up, matching her stride. The street smelled of wet concrete and sun-warmed earth, the kind of scent that made him think of spring cleaning in the garage and of his wife's laugh echoing through late evening kitchens. Daddy, can we invite Sophia too? Eve asked, voice hopeful. She likes building things, I wrote her a note. He smiled at the thought, picturing the shaky handwriting, the deliberate way Eve handed out invitations, friendship, as purposeful as turning a bolt. We can invite her, yes, that's a good idea. They walked beneath the budding trees, Eve's hand warm in his and the city receding behind them, not a vast machine, but merely background for these small, necessary joys. Back in the apartment, Trevor microwaved soup while Eve scribbled new lines into her journal. She drew a box labeled Dreams, filling it with color and crooked letters. On the counter, the mail lay in a small, neat pile, fewer bills, one letter from the union, another from the city council about a community initiative inviting him to consult on low-income housing retrofits. He sat beside Eve, the routines quieter now, no creak of stress in his voice, just the passing of a slow evening. What's today's note? He asked, sliding another tidbit onto her open page. She peered at his scribble. Stars shine best in the dark, she read aloud, voice stumbling on shine but triumphant at the end. She looked up proud. Yes, they do, he said, ruffling her hair. And you do too. The weeks rolled by, steady as a line of traffic lights changing along the avenue. Miranda Foster was not seen, not in city circles, not in the old hotel lobby, not even after the business press dug deep enough for a postscript. Her resignation was a lesson passed around in whispered meetings, pride fallen, legacy unmoored. Some said she moved to the coast, others that she was simply tired. In her absence, the company shuffled through leaders, the patent settlement draining a quarter's profits, but the scandal dimmed with time. For Trevor, the victory was less about money, more about silence interrupted. The union's contract gave him flexibility, a morning shift, afternoons reserved for Eve. He kept up his habit, one lunch note at a time. The after-school coordinator grinned every time she saw him, bringing spare wheels and bits of hardware to fix broken toys or help the older kids build go-karts out of milk crates. By May, the school's Inventor's Day arrived, and Eve was chosen to present her catapult with Sophia at her side. Trevor watched from the back row, feeling every heart-stopping second as she explained her diagram, words tripping but never falling, her fingers sure as they pointed to mistakes fixed, solutions traced from journal page to cardboard ramp. When the applause came, sudden and full, Trevor simply closed his eyes. He saw Eve grinning, eyes wild with accomplishment, while Sophia hugged her hard around the shoulders. He remembered how once years ago, his wife had stood on a parade ground, saluting a flag and laughing as Eve, then barely three, tumbled in the grass. In moments like these, time folded in upon itself. After Eve ran to him, trophy clutched in both fists. We won, Mr. Darren gave me a badge. He lifted her in the air, heart so full it ached. You earned it, kiddo, I'm so proud of you. Across the room, Darren stood with a clipboard, beaming. The principal shook hands with the union rep who was already sketching out new safety measures for next year's meet. Trevor felt a hand on his shoulder, Darren's grip firm and real. You doing okay now? Darren asked quietly, genuine as ever. Better than okay, Trevor said, starting to believe it sticks this time. Funny how some fights you win by just standing up, Darren said. He gave the badge on Eve's backpack a small tweak as though bestowing an extra measure of luck. One day, she'll tell the story herself. Trevor nodded, eyes damp with unshed tears. That's the hope. Spring turned to summer. The city lost some of its hardness, trees leafing out thick over sidewalks. Every Friday, Trevor and Eve visited the park, sometimes with a cluster of friends, sometimes just the two of them sharing a sandwich and a chocolate bar. The pressure behind Trevor's ear quieted to a dull, manageable thrum, the kind that reminded him he was alive but didn't claim him anymore. One late afternoon, just before dusk, he sat on the low brick wall outside their building while Eve played tag with Sophia and two more classmates. The laughter rose and fell, windows open all up and down the street. An older neighbor, Mrs. Yates from 2B, paused her grocery cart beside him. "Your girl looks happy," she said, voice creased with years. "She is," Trevor replied. "She's made this place home." The old woman smiled, slow and knowing. "So have you, son." The sun set gold across the city towers, slicing old wounds with light until they faded into memory. Trevor watched his daughter run, feet lithe, every movement certain. No legacy loomed. There was only this, an ordinary magic found in work, in dignity, in love held and not let go. Later, after Eve's bath, she ducked under the covers, journal open to a blank page. "What should I write tonight?" she asked. Trevor pulled the worn edge closer, pen in hand. "Write what you want most to remember." Eve thought hard, brow furrowed, then shaped the words out loud as she wrote, slow and sure. "My daddy listens." Trevor read it twice, tracing the edges. "That's my favorite too," he said softly. Outside, the city was quiet, the distant rumble of trucks, the hush of midnight wind. In the gentle dark, Trevor brushed close the curtain, kissed Eve's forehead, and slipped the journal back beneath her pillow for safekeeping. He sat for a while after she drifted off, watching city lights blink beyond old glass. When he finally stood, moving careful through the hush, he felt truly at rest, no longer silent by necessity, but content in the measured calm that comes of battles well fought and wounds left open to heal in the company of hope. And on the small table in the corner, a lunch note waited for morning, 3 words in tidy script: "You are enough." Under this roof it was true.